Between 1975 and 1980, one man brought widespread fear to the people of the north of England.
He was a violent, nasty, evil predator.
The attacks were sadistic and violent and led to the largest manhunt the police have ever faced. The man behind the crimes became known as the Yorkshire Ripper.
He hated women. They're not human to him.
Police eventually put an end to the Yorkshire Ripper's reign of terror when he was arrested in 1981 and finally identified as Peter Sutcliffe, a married lorry driver from West Yorkshire.
Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, is guilty of murder on all charges.
The story of the Yorkshire Ripper has been well trodden, but now, for the very first time, I have uncovered a treasure trove of information.
I looked up and there was a face in the bushes. Black beard, black hair, black eyes. I looked him straight in the eyes.
Was Sutcliffe admitting to attacks he was never convicted of?
They said that they didn't know whether to believe it or not. So it was you?
Yeah.
Hearing from those closest to him.
I said, hey Pete, there's that bloke there walking past. I'm sure he's that bloody Ripper. Someone must have cut his balls off, I'm sure it's him, and that Pete started crying.
And the moment of his arrest.
On the night you were arrested, were you going to attack the girl you was with?
Of course I was, that was the whole point.
Three years ago, I identified a source who was in regular contact with Sutcliffe whilst he was in prison, building his trust and giving him confidence to open up. I tasked her with getting information out of him about his life and his crimes.
They just callous bastards they are.
Yeah.
They're liars. Everything they think about me is lies, you know? Well, why do they do it? They just try to belittle me all the time, and they don't even know what I'm like, you know?
To gain access to a serial killer like Peter Sutcliffe is exceptional. He does not know that the questions that are being asked of him are specifically to try and give answers to his many victims. He's not prepared, he's at ease, and that is why the information that we're getting from Sutcliffe is as close to the truth as I believe you can get. I'm calling my source Brenda to protect her identity. It's the most unique access to a serial killer. But have we misunderstood him and got him all wrong? I want to have a chat about going right back to the beginning of what caused you to first make contact with Peter Sutcliffe.
I grew up with it. I was probably 13 when he was committing crime, and I followed the whole case. And then when I found out where he lived, my mum said my face was a picture because he lived just down the road from me. So I was straight down there for my picture taking outside the house. And it's all started there, and then as I got older, I just kept thinking, I wonder what he's really like. So one day I just decided to write to him, and then I got a reply from Peter.
What type of response did you get?
He wrote back saying, thank you for your letter, I'm very interested in getting to know you. But the more I got to know him, the more he opened up.
So you write to him quite a lot. There comes an occasion when you go and visit him.
That was strange. I was quite nervous. But when I sat down and talked to him, he's very gently spoken and so normal.
Hello, sweetie, it's Pete here. How are you, love?
I'm fine, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Good.
You been out today?
Yeah, but it's awful weather.
Oh, it's nice here.
Windy and everything.
Well, you know what they say, don't you, about March? Comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb.
Yeah. People say, you know, he's got these dark eyes, looks like the devil, and then when you meet him, of course, it's nothing like that. And I found myself looking at his hands at first and things, thinking what he'd done, you know. But it put me at ease very quickly. I couldn't imagine him doing that sort of thing in his right mind. His character and his personality didn't fit the crimes at all. I got to know the man behind the Yorkshire Ripper.
Earlier, the convoy of police cars and the green armoured van carrying Peter William Sutcliffe to the Old Bailey had swept out of the prison into the dank Brixton morning, the tiny blacked-out windows preventing even a glimpse of the man.
Sutcliffe was put on trial for 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. The attacks were sadistic and incredibly violent. His defence leaned heavily on the notion that he was schizophrenic and had been hearing voices in his head from God. Sutcliffe was convinced that the voices were coming from a gravestone at Bingley Cemetery where he used to work.
He'd been digging in the Catholic end of the cemetery when he heard a strange echoing voice, apparently coming from a nearby headstone. He climbed out of the grave and walked towards the headstone. The inscription on the grave was in Polish. Sutcliffe said of course he couldn't read it, but it seemed to say, "We be echo."
At his trial, he claimed diminished responsibility, that God had sent him on a mission to rid the streets of prostitutes.
Well, the state of mind of Peter Sutcliffe will continue to be the main point of issue here as the trial continues next week.
It was unanimous that I was suffering with schizophrenia. Because after all, the prosecution were on my side and the defence, the doctors, and it's their opinion that it should count, you know.
Yeah.
The judge overturned it. Who was he to turn it over? It's because he had the power to do it, because he was a judge. He was just an ignorant slob, you know.
I find it hard to accept that Sutcliffe believes God was instructing him to kill, and I struggle with the notion that he was suffering from schizophrenia. Could someone with a mental illness as extreme as Sutcliffe's claims carry out their daily life undetected? Dr. Ho is a forensic psychiatrist who was at Broadmoor when Sutcliffe was a patient and has studied the behaviour of killers. I'm hoping he can explain some of Sutcliffe's actions.
And you don't hear voices anymore, do you?
Yeah,
You still do?
yeah. But I can control it because I know what it is, you see, and it can't control me anymore.
Could I be suffering from schizophrenia but not know about it and my loved ones around me not know?
That's highly unlikely. By the time schizophrenia grips the person, it's going to be obvious. So the behavior often becomes erratic, perpetuated by whatever delusional beliefs. So it's unlikely that a person with severe schizophrenia will be able to work and conduct life as normal.
David, I might be wrong here, but I'm trying to distinguish between psychopathy and schizophrenia and whether or not he was much more psychopath than schizophrenic.
Psychosis is often thought to be a symptom of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is, of course, a severe and enduring mental illness. It's normally characterized by features of delusions, and also importantly, it often involves a breakdown in the person's functioning. I understand that some victims were injured and stabbed up to 50 times. So if one were to follow through the logic of him acting out in terms of being commanded by God, one might expect him to stop after death, after 1 or 2 fatal stabs. However, given the repetitive and continued nature of some of the wounds, that to me lends more to psychopathy.
So, Peter Sutcliffe was not suffering from schizophrenia at all. He was in fact a psychopath. I want to know if there's anything from his childhood that might help explain how he developed into such a dangerous man. I've managed to arrange a call with someone who knew Peter better than most.
79 Manor Road we lived at. That's where we lived till I was 13. And then when I was 14 and a half, Carl was born. But I was the eldest, so when he was born, I more or less brought him up, you know.
I've tracked down Sutcliffe's younger brother, Carl. He has stayed out of the media spotlight and was very reluctant to be interviewed. He's not spoken before in any detail about his relationship with his brother or his crimes, but he has agreed to talk to me on the phone.
All right, mate.
So I just really want to have a chat in terms of Peter. So his claim is that he heard voices and that he was told to go and kill prostitutes. What do you say of that?
Utter rubbish. I mean, he talked to me about all sorts. Yeah. I'm sure he mentioned a talking bloody gravestone.
Right.
That gravestone never spoke to him.
No. And if it had done, he'd have told
he
you.
made that up. He made that up. What he said was that if I played insane, I'll be out in 10 years anyway. They'll put me in a nut house.
Gosh, so he said to you, if I play insane, they'll let me out.
Yeah.
So you were quite close to Peter?
Oh, yeah. He was more like a dad to me than my dad.
Oh, really? Okay.
He'd teach me how to mend cars, mend motorbikes, take me ice skating, things like dads are supposed to do with the kids.
Yeah.
Peter did that for me.
How long
Even
before?
used to run my girlfriend home so she didn't get attacked by a Ripper.
Did he?
He never touched Johnny. He was a perfect gentleman to us, he said so. Yeah, well, he was a good brother.
Peter Sutcliffe appeared to have a relatively normal upbringing. I don't believe his voice of God story for one moment. So what turned a seemingly normal family man into a monster capable of such sickening brutality and one of Britain's most vicious serial killers?
These two tarts were from in the lift. I realised that they were prostitutes, and that's the reason I went to Silsden to see if I could see them to bump one of them off, because I was on a mission at the time.
Notorious British serial killer Peter Sutcliffe was convicted of killing 13 women between 1975 and 1980.
Earlier, police witnesses said Sutcliffe had spoken of his hatred of prostitutes. He said, "It just grew and grew until I became a beast. I blamed prostitutes for everything," he said.
His crimes were barbaric. His killing spree had women in the north of England fearful for their lives for years. But to anyone that knew him, Sutcliffe seemed like an ordinary man, a gentleman even. So what happened? What changed in him? It seems that Sutcliffe himself has his own theory.
Well, I told you when I had that motorcycle accident in 1965, it split all my helmet and knocked my head in at one side.
Yeah.
Really bad concussion I had. I was unconscious for 2 days, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I should have gone to hospital, really. I woke up 2 days later and my mum says, "Are you all right?" She said, "I was thinking of calling an ambulance. I couldn't wake you up."
So Sutcliffe believes that his motorbike accident in 1965 left him unconscious for 2 days and caused injury to his brain, although there's no evidence to suggest that he had any hospital treatment for this incident. Narinder Kapoor is a neuropsychologist, and I need him to help me understand what impact this bike accident may have had on Sutcliffe's behaviour. I want to play you a audio recording. So this has never been heard before. This is Peter Sutcliffe talking from jail.
When I had that motorcycle accident in 1965, psychiatrists and the psychologists said that was very, very likely to have affected me and caused the hallucinations a couple of years later, you know.
So he used that significantly at his trial in his defence. What do you make of it?
So any significant brain injury is going to be associated over the following days and weeks with quite significant problems. You don't just have a brain injury and then wake up, as he seems to have done, wake up and you're perfectly fine. It doesn't work like that. And so his account of that is really quite implausible. It's quite rare to get what we call schizophrenia or psychosis after a brain injury. And if we do see it, it's barn door severe brain injury with maybe a fractured skull, with focal lesions, and he never had that.
To claim you got psychosis, schizophrenia as a result of a brain injury, you're saying is extremely rare.
I personally have probably only seen 1 or 2 cases in 40 years of practice. So I think that all in all, I think it would be quite atypical for that injury he had to be related to his subsequent behaviours.
I feel lucky I wasn't killed, really, or maybe not, I don't know. But it's prevented all the tragedy that followed it, you know.
A few years after his motorbike accident in which he claimed to have sustained a brain injury, Sutcliffe carried out his first known attack.
Well, my first attack wasn't until 1969. It was that clumsy attack with the sock with the pedals in, you know.
I'm in London to meet with feminist writer Julie Bindel. She was a student in Leeds in 1979 during the height of the Yorkshire Ripper hunt.
We found out from his best friend at the time, Trevor Birdsall, that a great fun night out for Sutcliffe was to be driven around by Birdsall, get out of his car with a sock with stones in the sock, chase down some of the women and hit them hard over the head, causing a lot of pain and injury. That was just a little kind of minor leisure activity, doubtless in the build-up to his more serious offending.
I'm going to play you him talking about one of his sock attacks.
Okay.
She didn't press charges because her husband had done exactly the same thing to somebody else. So she was a prostitute, but she wouldn't press charges. She wasn't injured, you know. The sock burst and all the pebbles went over some cars. Somebody saw it and took Trevor's number plate when I got into his car, you know. She didn't press charges, you see.
Listening to his voice, just a bloke down the road, bloke who runs the corner shop, bloke that you take your car to be fixed.
But that shows that it was just the first attack, very amateurish, and I had to be more careful and more specific after that.
The more that Sutcliffe attacked, the more brutal his actions became, and 6 years after the sock attack, his violence towards women escalated when he committed his first recorded murder, that of 28-year-old Wilma McCann.
In Leeds in October 1975, luck ran out for Ripper victim number 1. Body identified as that of 28-year-old divorcee Wilma McCann, found 150 yards from the council house where she'd lived with her 4 children.
The first one I actually killed was in 1975. Wilma McCann was the first one.
Someone who has studied Sutcliffe's crimes extensively is true crime author Richard C. Cobb. Richard, set the scene. Wilma McCann's body is found. Where and who found her?
Her body was discovered by the milkman, her head up towards the grass and her feet out towards the car park. Her injuries were quite horrific. She'd been stabbed 15 times and she'd received 2 hammer blows to the top of the head. Both hammer blows had fractured her skull and her white trousers were pulled down to her knees. She'd been stabbed 3 times under the left breast, twice under the right breast, stabbed 9 times around the umbilicus, the abdomen area, and of course the fractures on her head.
A brutal murder.
It was a very brutal murder indeed.
And in terms of any other evidence left at the crime scene?
Evidence at the crime scene, the pathologist who examined the body found semen traces on the back of her pants. So if that was him, it means he was here and he actually masturbated at the actual scene.
So the view in relation to Wilma's case is that after the murder, or in the course of the murder, he masturbated and ejaculated over Wilma McCann's body.
He did, yes.
That necrophilia, that's making love to dead people or something, you know?
Yeah, it says the Yorkshire Ripper was a necrophiliac who masturbated over corpses
What a load of rubbish.
and got sexual kicks from the bodies.
No one even dream of it, you know?
No.
What's the point? These people are really sick.
There was clearly a sexual element to Sutcliffe's crimes. Look what he did to Wilma McCann. His claim that this is a voice from God caused him to do that. That's absolute rubbish, because there's no way a voice from God would have told him to sexually assault his victims and mutilate them. Utter rubbish. I want to play Dr. Ho a recording where Sutcliffe faces the question of whether his crimes were sexually motivated.
There was nothing sexual in my crimes. They just make you sick. These people are sick. They are really sick themselves to writing stuff like that, you know. Because they think they can make money and sell books. That's all they're interested in. They don't care a damn about the truth.
So I think in terms of the sexual element, we know Peter Sutcliffe stabbed some of his victims in their genitalia. He masturbated over his victims. He sexually assaulted his victims. Is that what would you expect to see from someone who's hearing voices from God?
No, I think it's highly unlikely, because actions should be interpreted for what they are. And if there was sexual actions, as we know there were in this case, that calls into question the proportion of his motivation being driven by psychosis. And I think the simplest answer is he was driven by an element of sexual desire.
I'm meeting retired West Yorkshire Police Detective Bob Bridgestock, who worked on the Ripper investigation and attended the scene of Sutcliffe's 10th murder victim, Josephine Whittaker. So, Bob, this is the scene of Josephine Whittaker's murder.
Josephine, a bank clerk, 19 years of age, lovely girl, been to see her grandparents, walking home, cut across this moor.
Right.
And, sadly unknown to her, Peter Sutcliffe is driving round in his Sunbeam Rapier and he sees her.
So he's looking for his next victim?
He's looking for his next kill. She's attacked from behind, which was Sutcliffe's format anyway.
Yeah.
Hits her twice with the hammer. She's dragged back onto this area here, about 30 feet away from the road. It's not well lit, so it is feeling safe. It's a really what people would call a blitz attack.
Yeah.
A really emotional, massive attack, which he does with all his victims. He stabbed her 21 times. He had a sharpened screwdriver, which he'd made into a Bradall type, and he'd inserted that into her vagina. So this is sexually motivated, and he gets his gratification from killing and attacking lone women.
And that goes exactly against his view that this was a voice of God.
Exactly. The sexuality would never come into it.
It wouldn't come into it, would it?
Wouldn't come into it.
If you had a voice of God, you wouldn't have a sexual gratification over those murders.
This is my personal feeling. That is just nonsense. That is just somebody coming out with an excuse for what he's done. And really, he was a violent, nasty, evil predator.
The police had profiled Sutcliffe's earlier victims, labelling them prostitutes, leading the public to believe that sex workers were the women most at risk. But it was his 5th murder that really grabbed the attention of the nation and turned the investigation upside down.
After another 9 weeks came Ripper victim number 5. This time it was 16-year-old shop assistant Jayne MacDonald, mistaken for a prostitute when she took a shortcut home from a disco through the red light area of Leeds.
Did you have a lot of regrets when you killed Jayne MacDonald, a 16-year-old?
Yes, I did, yeah. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Did you have a lot of regrets when you killed Jayne MacDonald, a 16-year-old?
Yes, I did, yeah. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, sadly, you know.
This time it was 16-year-old shop assistant Jayne MacDonald, mistaken for a prostitute when she took a shortcut home from a disco through the red light area of Leeds.
I didn't believe that she wasn't a prostitute. I thought she was in the red light area at that time of night, you know, walking slowly and that, you know. And 1 or 2 cars were flashing the lights at her as well, you know, so.
Jayne's murder was brutal. Sutcliffe struck her twice with a hammer, pulled up her clothes and then stabbed her multiple times in the chest and back before inserting a broken bottle into her chest. Her murder was a turning point in the Ripper investigation.
Her murder basically was the one that gained the most public interest, because up until now, most of the victims were considered to be prostitutes, and there wasn't a great deal of public sympathy attached to the women of the night. Some felt, especially more in the religious communities, that the women, tragic as it was, their murder, that somehow it could be prevented because their lifestyle may have contributed to their murder. But now we have this young 16-year-old described in the press and by the police as an innocent victim.
What was she doing at 1:30 in the morning in a prostitute area? And I didn't know how old she was, I had no idea, you know. I did feel it later on when I convinced myself that she hadn't been a prostitute, you know.
Until this attack, the police believed Sutcliffe solely targeted sex workers. So not only did Jayne MacDonald's murder shift the course of the investigation, It also highlighted the shocking profiling of women in general in the 1970s.
The narrative was that there is such a thing as an innocent victim. In other words, there are some women who this man was killing who were not innocent, which means they were somehow culpable, they were somehow to blame. This was misogyny. This was something about how women on the streets, women who'd had a history of abuse, women who were from poor families, were definitely worth less than so-called respectable women.
Representatives of the English Collective of Prostitutes and other feminist groups carried placards and shouted slogans. They also blamed the press for sometimes referring to these victims as being innocent.
Some of those police officers spoke about women in prostitution as though they were the scum of the earth. But the way that the women were spoken about was either because they were in prostitution or because the police officers saw them as no better than. He was able to get away with it for so long because of police and press incompetency and the general culture of misogyny that was prevalent throughout the 70s in the UK and elsewhere.
The reality is that the police attitude in labelling all the Ripper victims prostitutes meant that Sutcliffe was free to go on attacking women, because resources were focused on areas frequented by working girls, and significantly, many non-prostitute attacks were not linked or connected to the Ripper.
And I just got a letter from Daniel Brown, my friend in Newcastle. He sent 20 quid for breakfast.
All right.
So that was good of him. These gestures, they mean a lot, you know.
Sutcliffe communicates with people all around the world as pen pals, writing letters to them, having phone calls with them. But there is clearly someone else, much closer to home, other than Brenda, who is in regular contact with Sutcliffe.
Daniel Brown. Yeah, I write to him every week. You know, he's just a hard-working family man. Just the way he talks and everything, you can see how sincere he is. He's got 3 kids, you know. They all call me Uncle Peter and everything.
I've managed to track down Daniel Brown, who I would describe as a superfan. I've come to the northeast of England to see him.
Oh, he's a lovely lad, he's Daniel, he's 37. He's a really good friend, you know, he's very reliable, he's very discreet, you know.
We have here a wall which is, in essence, dedicated to Peter Sutcliffe. Just tell me about some of the items.
Well, some of the things I've been collecting over the years, I've got the original billboard poster from newsstands, and then we've got one of Peter's shirts that he wore in the Henley ward, and there's a portion of one of his letters inside of it as well. At the top here, we've got the street sign from where he lived in Bradford, and at the bottom, the street sign, that's where he was arrested in Sheffield.
And just behind you, on here, we've got a handprint. What is that?
Yeah, this is a hand tracing from Peter that I obtained directly from him. I just asked him, I says, can I have a hand tracing? Many collectors do collect hand tracings from serial killers, yes.
He did ask for a handprint once. On a sheet of paper, handprint, you know, where you draw around your hand. They send their print to me. Right. Ask if I could send mine, you know.
And the shirt, whose is that?
The blue shirt, that's another one of Peter's that he wore when he was in Broadmoor as well.
One of the things that struck me as soon as I saw you was the similarity, visually, you have with Sutcliffe in terms of the beard, the hair. I mean, have you chosen to look like that because of him?
No, I've actually had I've looked like this for many years, actually, yeah. The beard I've had long before I started talking to Peter.
Right. Daniel, tell me, why did you become interested and write to Peter Sutcliffe?
It's because I am interested in true crime, and I do collect true crime memorabilia from many famous cases. When I first reached out to Peter, writing to him, I just really wanted to add something to my collection from him personally. So, like, something personally obtained from them is much better than going out and buying it.
Do you think there's a morbid kind of fascination with him that you have?
I don't think a morbid one, no, I don't think it's a morbid thing. I collect crime history. I don't just collect things from Peter, I collect various other things from various serial killers.
And what did you know about his crimes?
I know quite a bit about the case, actually. I've studied the case quite a bit over the years, so I just wanted to get to know the man behind it, really.
And do you feel you have got to know the man behind it?
Well, I got to know Peter as Peter. The Yorkshire Ripper was 40 years ago, so I only got to know Peter himself, you know. I didn't get to know his bad nature, really. I just got to know him in recent years.
There's people that perhaps would say, how can you be a friend to a man who so brutally killed 13 women and many, many more that he attacked?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to take a step back. You do have to take a step back when, you know, you're talking to someone like that, you know, especially you're writing to someone or you receive a phone call, you know, and I did on many occasions and think, I've just spoke to the Yorkshire Ripper.
And did you ever talk to Sutcliffe about his crimes?
No, we never talked about the crimes, no. We talked about the mental health side of it. We talked about the voice of God, so the voice that instructed him to go out and kill.
So he was still telling you that the reason he committed those crimes was the voice of God?
Yeah.
And do you believe that?
I do, in a way, yes, I do. I mean, I do believe that he was very poorly. To go out and kill 13 people, you know, that is an illness.
So do you think if someone goes out and kills 13 people, that makes them ill rather than evil?
I think both, really. I think if you can do that and get up the next day and just have a normal life, I think there's definitely something wrong with you, yeah.
Sutcliffe's infamy continued to grow throughout his years behind bars as younger generations became fascinated with this psychotic serial killer.
Got another 2 letters from America, strangers. One of them's one of them cheerleaders, you know. She wrote, says she's a cheerleader teacher, but she said she'll send some photographs.
He revelled in the attention, receiving letters from so-called superfans all over the world and liked to write back to them.
I like to people in Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, you know, because there isn't any more of them Harry Potters.
No, there ain't, no.
I put them on people's letters who've got kids because they love them Harry Potter stickers, but yeah, they only had them for a certain amount of time, didn't they?
Peter Sutcliffe had built up quite a network of friends, pen pals, whilst he was in prison. Just talk me through some of those people he communicated with.
Oh, loads. Lots of women. One from America that wanted to marry him. His parents even wrote to him saying, will you marry our daughter?
I told her, look, I said, let's face up to it. It's flattering for a 27-year-old to want to marry a 73-year-old man, you know.
Yeah.
I said, but, you know, where's the sense in that, really? You know, you've got all your life in front of you.
Yeah.
She was signing herself Crystal Marie Sutcliffe. You know, she had a really this kind of a fascination, you know.
Yeah.
She got carried away, and in the end she was saying, oh, I love you like crazy, and my wife, she was putting on the letters MWAAA.
I mean, I think he used to get 30 letters a week.
Gosh. Do you think, and I might be unfair by asking this, do you think you became slightly obsessed by the Yorkshire Ripper?
Yeah, a little bit, but I always had an interest in, like, programmes about serial killers and things like that, and, you know, whether more true crime than not, but I always had an interest.
It's clear from listening to these recordings that Sutcliffe had a real affection for Brenda, and I wonder to a point, even an obsession with her.
Anyway, sweetheart, I really miss you, I do. I think the world of you. Can't wait to see you.
Yeah.
My #1 angel. Okay, well, look, baby kings, I'm going to have to go because there's a few waiting. And,
all right.
I'm right with you in spirit.
All right.
I wish I was on the doorstep.
I know, yeah.
Take care, God bless you, sweetheart. Bye-bye for now, love. Bye.
Sutcliffe was brazen, arrogant and not very clever, Yet repeatedly luck fell on his side, and with the help of the police making fatal errors, he was able to evade justice for a long time. Thankfully now, for the first time, his tapes are finally providing some answers.
At the Yorkshire incident rooms, there is also concern about 2 more prostitutes missing from their usual haunts in Leeds. 2 more people to keep tabs on in Britain's longest-running, fully active murder inquiry. So far, police have interviewed no less than 50,000 people, taken 12,000 statements. And still, the police can't get all the help they need from the people who inhabit the twilight world of prostitution.
The Yorkshire Ripper manhunt was the biggest case West Yorkshire Police had ever faced, and remains one of the largest criminal investigations in history. Taking overall command of the inquiry was Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield, a gruff, unapproachable, heavy-drinking old-school copper. The scale of the operation was so big that the incident room floor had to be reinforced to handle the sheer weight of the paperwork. Mike Hamilton is a journalist who I've known for a long time and has extensively covered the Yorkshire Ripper case. I can't think of a case in modern day that reflects the Yorkshire Ripper.
There isn't one, thankfully. If someone carried out offending like this in the modern day, they'd be caught quite quickly. He was able to get away with his attacks through fairly simple means, such as shifting where he attacked people, shifting his hunting grounds, if you like, away from Leeds to different areas, such as Bradford, then Manchester. And he was able to keep ahead of the police by things like changing his car. Yeah. So it's fairly simple things that kept him one step ahead of the police, which, thankfully, I would hope would not happen these days.
Nowadays, police have the Home Office large major inquiry system, but this was the 1970s, so long before any computers. Everything was handwritten and filed using index cards. So the more leads that were generated, the more cards created, slowing the investigation down, allowing Sutcliffe to slip further away. The sheer scale of the investigation led it to be fatally flawed.
Looking back, yeah, there were mistakes made, and we know there were mistakes made. It was massive. There was this inquiry. I've dealt with some major inquiries, some serial killers since, but nothing on this scale. It was prolific. It was going at a pace which caused problems. The information that was coming in was massive. I mean, it changed the face of policing. It showed how inadequate we were.
In 1969, Sutcliffe started attacking women, some 6 years prior to his first known murder. Some luck, along with significant police failings and attitudes, allowed him to grow in confidence and attack women unfettered. In the summer of 1975, there were at least 3 women who, despite receiving horrific head injuries, survived attacks from Sutcliffe. Tracy Brown is one of these surviving victims.
I saw this Tracy Brown. She didn't look 15, she looked about 19 or 20, you know, she all dressed up. And she was walking slowly up this lane. I thought, oh, you know, she's probably one of these prostitutes, because I had it in my mind that the Silsden must be full of prostitutes.
So, Tracy Brown, she's been out to town with her sister and friends. She's walking up to her house up there, about a mile long here. Tell me what happens to her.
Well, this is the Bradley Road, which runs directly down to Silsden town centre. And if you follow the road up, you would come to the farmhouse where Tracy and Mandy were staying with their family. And this is the actual area where the attack first took place in the 27th of August, 1975.
I hit her with a branch or something, threw her over a wall. And I climbed over the wall, and I was thinking of bumping her off, and this voice said, "Stop, stop. It's a mistake." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you'll be all right. I'm going now. I'm not coming back, I'm going now. You'll be okay." Go down to my car, then a car came up the road, and I saw it stop at the top of the road, so she must have climbed over the wall, and they took her home, you know. She can't have been seriously injured, because she would have still been behind the wall, you know.
Tracy's attack is part of a significant pattern that Sutcliffe was now developing before he committed his first murder of William McCann.
That's right. If we look at the month before this attack, we go back to July 1975. He's already attacked Anna Rogalski, not too far away in Keighley. 2 weeks before this actual attack, he'd already attacked Olive Smelt. Both those attacks were by a hammer. They're both to the back of the head, and luckily, those two people survived. Now, the interesting thing about this attack is Tracy Brown had walked for 30 minutes with Sutcliffe. So she was able to give a fantastic description of her attacker. And she got right down to the hair, the beard, and the dark eyes. The fact he spoke with a soft Yorkshire accent. If they had taken Tracy Brown's photo fit seriously, they would have had Sutcliffe.
Another woman who was attacked by a man fitting the description of Sutcliffe was Marcella Claxton. She was attacked in 1976 in Leeds on her way home from a party. Her description of the attacker closely resembled Tracy Brown's photo fit, but police dismissed both of these attacks as being carried out by the Ripper because neither were prostitutes. Whilst Marcella was convinced she was attacked by Sutcliffe, this has never been formally accepted, but I've just uncovered something remarkable in the recordings.
I've been watched the rest of that documentary about you.
Did you think it was fair or was it biased?
Well, did you attack that Marcella Claxton, a black girl?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they said that they didn't know whether to believe her or not. So it was you?
Yeah.
This goes to the heart of why I tasked Brenda to ask specific questions of Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe has never publicly admitted to these attacks before. I believe because they don't fit his mission from God narrative. But finally, we can definitively say that Sutcliffe was responsible for the attempted murders of Tracy Brown and Marcella Claxton. Policing was basic in the 70s and 80s compared to what it is now, and forensics now is king. But in those days, he clearly wasn't aware because he left so many forensic clues at his crime scenes. But what he was aware of was the parochial nature of the police forces. And when West Yorkshire Police put loads of officers onto the street, he moved elsewhere.
And the Ripper came at his next victim 60 miles away across the Pennines in Manchester. A post-mortem showed that days after the murder, the killer had returned to mutilate Jean Jordan's body still further and drag it to a more open position.
Jean Jordan was a sex worker. On the night she was murdered, Sutcliffe had paid her £5 for her services before brutally attacking and killing her. Days later, after he'd realised that banknotes can be traced, he returned to the body in the hope of recovering the damning evidence. He did not find the £5 note. However, police would later find it and trace it back to Sutcliffe's employer. Within days of finding Jean Jordan's body, detectives descended on the killer's workplace and questioned everyone on the payroll.
Did that worry you?
A little bit when they come round questioning people at work and that, you know. They couldn't prove who'd got the £5 note.
Jean's body was found near an allotment in Chorlton, Greater Manchester. I've arranged to meet the man who found her body, Bruce Jones.
Yeah, I found Jean Jordan. We'd got a new allotment and we'd got a shed and there was a place across from the old allotments that had a lot of bricks there, and I was going over there getting them in a wheelbarrow and coming back and we were laying them down for a flatbed for a shed. Now, I'd gone 5 times for 5 loads of bricks in the wheelbarrow. But the person who was with the allotment on, he decided we needed 1 more barrow load. So a while later, I went back. And on the way back, there was the body of Jane Jordan.
And you're absolutely certain that when you saw her, there was no... that she hadn't been there previously?
No, she'd not been there on the 5 times. And then when I was looking at Jean, I looked up and there was a face in the bushes. Black beard, black hair, black eyebrows, black eyes.
So did you look at him?
I looked him straight in the eyes, but But I didn't take any notice. I was looking at this girl, and
yes,
you know, your mind's all over the place, and I looked down again, it'd gone. So.
Did he clock that you'd seen him?
He must have been watching me.
So he thought you'd gone.
He's got to have been.
He then took Jayne's body and placed it out in the open.
Why he did that, I don't know. I don't understand why.
I want to play you him talking about...
Yorkshire Ripper.
Have you ever heard his voice?
No.
Okay, I appreciate this is going to be hard.
On the night you were arrested, were you going to attack the girl you was with?
Of course I was. That was the whole point. Didn't pick him up for any other reason.
So you were on a mission that night?
Yeah.
What do you think, listening to him now?
That voice doesn't match the face I saw. That doesn't match the pictures I've seen of the Yorkshire Ripper. God almighty. He was proud of what he was doing. He wouldn't have stopped.
Over the course of the Ripper inquiry, Sutcliffe was questioned multiple times, and because of the incompetency of the police investigation, they failed to identify him as a suspect.
That was one of the times they said they questioned me, one of the 9 times, but it was only 8 times, really.
But police failings aside, Sutcliffe had a lot of luck go his way. In March 1979, he benefited from the biggest diversion in the Ripper investigation.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. But Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
Wearside Jack taunted police with letters and an audio recording, and the officer in charge of the Ripper manhunt, Assistant Chief Constable Oldfield, was convinced that these were the work of the Yorkshire Ripper.
When that Wearside Jack, as they call him, you know, when he sent the tape, did you ever listen to it?
I heard it on television. They played it on the TV, you see. I said, thanks to God, you know, because you're guiding everything, you know. At the time when I believed, you know, that it was a miracle, I knew that, I believed that God had done that and got him to mislead him and everything, you know.
All the eggs now are in one basket. You know, it's as though the inquiry is suddenly taking an increase in gear, if you like. Everything is focused on Wearside Jack. And on our, you know, looking back, not everybody agreed with it.
Could you challenge Oldfield as an investigating officer?
You can challenge senior officers, but there's a limit. One of my colleagues, he'd looked into Sutcliffe and he'd been told to shut it, basically. And if you want to stack shelves at the supermarket, then go do it. We are looking for a man that comes from Wearside, and that was it.
No, I already believed I was being protected, you know, so it was a slight distraction for the police to be going up the northeast, you know. It wasn't all that important to me, really. It did slow things down a bit, you know.
Sutcliffe evaded capture for over a decade from 1969 to his arrest in 1981. But just how did his reign finally come to an end? And what did he make of it? Peter Sutcliffe held the nation in a grip of terror in the 1970s. He had a lot of luck fall his way on many occasions, and along with the police incompetency, it provided him with so many opportunities to evade capture. But Sutcliffe's luck finally ran out in January 1981.
We were patrolling an area where prostitutes frequent. We saw a Rover car parked. As regards the vehicle, it came back that the vehicle was bearing false number plates. We then made other inquiries and ended up in arresting the 2 occupants.
24-year-old prostitute Olivia Reevers was in the car with him.
He'd picked the girl up and they'd driven to a quiet spot. He told her his name was Dave. The couple didn't have sex.
On the night you were arrested, were you going to attack the girl you was with?
Of course I was. That was the whole point. Didn't pick him up for any other reason.
So you were on a mission that night?
Yeah.
Sutcliffe was arrested and taken to Dewsbury Police Station. The arresting officers had no idea of the significance of their actions. They had caught the Yorkshire Ripper.
During a night of questioning by Ripper Squad detectives, Sutcliffe never cracked. Then one of the arresting officers had a hunch. He remembered that Sutcliffe had left the car to relieve himself while being questioned. He returned to the scene. It was now 24 hours later, and there, lying in the bushes, he found a hammer and a knife hidden.
When they caught me, you know, they shouldn't have let me go for a piss, because I didn't want a piss. I just wanted to hide the stuff, you know.
Did you hide some in the police station as well?
A knife. They're idiots, you know. I just said I'm going to use the toilet, so they didn't even search me before I went. And I put it in the flushing cabinet at the top, you know, where the ball cock is. But they found it later on.
Why did you leave the car, said the detective. To relieve myself, said Sutcliffe. I think it was for another purpose, said the detective. I think you're leading up to the Yorkshire Ripper, said Sutcliffe. What about the Yorkshire Ripper, said the detective. Well, said Sutcliffe, it's me.
He is being questioned in relation to the Yorkshire Ripper murders.
Why did you confess?
Because I felt, oh, you know, it's just, it was all on too much strain all the time, you know.
Yeah, did you think that because I found the stuff, the game were up as such?
More or less, yeah.
Absolutely delighted. Yes.
I wanted to have another chat with Carl Sutcliffe to see if his brother had ever said or done anything that in hindsight was suspicious or concerning. Did Peter say anything about the Yorkshire Ripper prior to, obviously, him being caught? Did he ever discuss it with you?
No, but he once come to my flat and I was convinced this chap who lived up road was the Yorkshire Ripper because he was a Geordie and he looked just like the photo of it. And I said, hey, Pete, there's that bloke there walking past. I'm sure he's that bloody Ripper. And I said, someone must have cut his balls off. I'm sure it's him. And Pete started crying and said, Sonia's all I've got left now, you know, and sort of stormed off. It didn't click to me that...
Because now you're telling me that story, Carl, that suggests to me that you just caught him out.
Yeah, I did. I caught him unawares, but at the time I didn't put it together.
So you would be seeing Peter at his house during the course of him carrying out his attacks, and then he'd change in behaviour from him?
No, he was just saying.
And then what happens when you hear he's been charged with all the murders and the attempted murders?
I just totally shocked. If you'd have known him, you'd have never have thought it. He'd help anybody out. And we sat in this little room with him and speaking to him, and I just said, well, did you do it then, Peter, and why? He said, yeah, it was me, yeah, I did them all. And I said, why? And he just said, just cleaning up, our kid, just cleaning up.
How did you feel when you got arrested? Were you relieved, do you think?
I was, when I finally told them it was me, you know?
Yeah.
I thought that's a huge burden gone off my shoulders, you know?
Right.
It was such a big relief that it was coming to an end, and I hoped it would, you know.
As the armoured van disappeared beneath the heavy studded portcullis of Newgate Street down the ramp to the cells, the crowd was exceptionally silent. Minutes later, Peter William Sutcliffe was in the dock, pleading diminished responsibility.
On the 29th of April 1981, 4 months after his arrest, Sutcliffe goes on trial at the Old Bailey in London. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Sutcliffe pleaded guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Today, Dr. Hugo Milne, the first of 3 psychiatrists who'll be giving evidence, has been in the witness box all day, explaining why he's convinced that Peter Sutcliffe is mad.
Throughout his defence, he claimed that he was on a mission from God. He believed that he was schizophrenic and that the voice he could hear in his head was God instructing him to kill prostitutes.
He knew he must wipe out these people, these scum from society. Well, the Attorney General told the jury that the prosecution didn't accept this. That Sutcliffe first mentioned the voices at his 8th interview with the doctors, and not before, and he'd never mentioned it to the police.
But it only took the jury 6 hours to see through Sutcliffe's lies and find him sane and guilty on all counts.
So Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, is a mass murderer, by a majority of 10-2, guilty of murder on all charges.
He was handed 13 life sentences and denied parole for at least 30 years.
It's the first time in British legal history that happened. The judges overturned the unanimous doctors thing, you know.
Yeah.
It was obviously biased. I should have appealed against the judge being biased in the first place, you know. Unanimous that it was schizophrenia. Anyway, he's long dead now, you know.
Sutcliffe was one of the country's highest profile prisoners, and as such he did get treated differently. The tapes reveal how much he enjoyed his status and what life was like for him alongside other notorious prisoners.
I'm as good as any prisoner. I never got any trouble. I've been a model prisoner and patient for all these years, you know. They just put a foot around.
They said
if you've got a mental illness, you can come to terms with it and deal with it, you know, which is what I've already done. I'm totally sorted, you know.
1981, Sutcliffe is sent to Parkhurst Prison. Really tough jail, and I know from being a police officer, inmates hated it there. Granted Category A status, very much for his own protection as much as anything else. And 18 months in, he found out just how tough Parkhurst Prison was.
Did you get attacked once in a prison before?
Yeah, with half a broken coffee jar.
Yeah, where was that, at Parkhurst or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, it gives them a bit of status, doesn't it, you know?
Sutcliffe appeared at Newport Crown Court in the case against his attacker, James Costello.
Shortly after he'd given evidence, Sutcliffe was taken out of the court and out of the courthouse. He was bundled into a yellow prison van, escorted by 2 police cars, photographers struggling to take pictures.
Sutcliffe proclaimed that he was schizophrenic, and as such, he should not be sent to a mainstream jail, but to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital in Berkshire. He finally got his wish. The day after the attack, Sutcliffe was sectioned under the Mental Health Act. When he got moved to Broadmoor, that was a massive thing. Even the Home Secretary was directly involved in that decision.
Yes, that was hugely controversial to move into Broadmoor. Life in Broadmoor is far more expensive to the taxpayer. It cost well over 11 million to keep him in Broadmoor all those years. It's £330,000 a year.
Gosh.
It is a hospital, so he was deemed as a patient at Broadmoor, which must have jarred with victims and relatives of victims.
In 2016, a health tribunal was held to determine whether Sutcliffe should remain a patient at Broadmoor, or if he was considered well enough to be moved back to a Category A prison.
I can't see him sending you back to prison, May. I just can't see it.
With my eyesight failing and diabetes, heart trouble and going blind, you know.
Yeah.
I feel so worried about me. Why do they want to send me back to prison, you know? But it seems to me like they just want me off their hands.
Also tonight, the Yorkshire Ripper's no longer mentally ill and could be back in prison after 31 years in Broadmoor.
Sutcliffe's transfer from Broadmoor to Frankland significantly reduced the cost to the public purse, from over £300,000 per year to around £63,000.
He fought tooth and nail against the move to Frankland. He described it as a cesspit of despair. But when he got there, he then found he actually enjoyed it. He found he got along with lots of the other inmates. He was looked after quite well, and he was able to continue with all the perks of his lifestyle as he had in Broadmoor.
Oh, I'm doing well. There's a lot of good lads here. I'm getting on well with everybody. And they've lent me coffee and tea and stamps and stuff, you know.
Oh, so it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be?
Oh, no, it's a lot better than Broadmoor.
Sutcliffe clearly enjoyed mixing with other high-profile killers in jail. On the same wing was child killer Ian Huntley.
Only came round to my cell the other day and asked me if I could show him the tub of Quality Street that I'd got ready for Christmas. It gets around quick, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Prison life for these brutal killers brings with it a mundane routine. Sutcliffe's recordings give a glimpse into other prisoners' personal lives too.
You used to dress effeminately with miniskirts on and...
Not prison mind them doing that?
No. Not if they're having a sex change. Because he had a pair of tits as well, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Because there's so much of that going on. There's some filthy sods in here, you know, buggery and all that sort of thing going on, you know? It's against the Bible's teaching and everything, you know?
Such hypocrisy and homophobia, coming from a man who brutally slayed women, mutilated them, and even masturbated over their bodies. So he goes from Broadmoor to Franklin on the basis that he is now rehabilitated, mentally wise.
Yes.
Did he accept that?
Yes. And he said if he ever got out, he'd never do anything like that again, which I don't think he would have done.
Yeah.
Oh. I just think sometimes, you know, with all these years I've spent inside, I start my 40th year on 3rd of January. Not enough for anybody, isn't it, really, you know? I'd be a model citizen out there, you know?
Sutcliffe's delusional thought was that his return to mainstream prison was a step closer to his bid for freedom.
If I get that squashed, that all-life tariff,
yeah,
I'll be out on parole. So that's the biggest anchor, really, around the neck. Just spitefulness, really.
He was a bit delusional in that he thought he would get out. He was in the process of appealing his sentence. He was always ringing his solicitor and doing work with that. But yeah, he thought he'd get out.
40 years ago. I mean, we should have a bit of compassion after such a long sentence, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Well over more than half my life I've been inside, you know? Ridiculous, really.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they know how I feel, you know, how regretful I am and everything, you know. I wouldn't hurt a fly if I was outside, you know.
No.
I've changed completely, my beliefs and everything have changed, you know. But try and tell them to these thickheads, oh, you haven't done your psychology, oh, they're pathetic.
Sutcliffe's fight for freedom was not the only battle he faced. His health had been in slow decline.
I was lying there on a cold floor from 3:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the morning. And 5 minutes later, the tube came out of my catheter and I was sat there soaking wet with piss. Yeah, because you can't do nothing about this testicle. It's so swollen, it's massive, weak. I keep collapsing there. Don't know why, just try to get out of bed and I just fall flat on the floor and I can't get up. I was up all night walking back and forward in my cell. I couldn't lie down. Oh,
dear.
It's like being in hell, you know.
He was weak and suffering, and I'm sure in pain, but nothing like the pain suffered by all his many victims and their families. Although feeling pathetic and sorry for himself, he had a much bigger battle on his hands.
The specialist came in to see me the other day and he was saying, would you want resuscitating if you died?
What, did you say no then?
Yeah.
Now weak and frail, he succumbed to COVID-19 and his life was in the balance. Decades earlier, he had taken the lives of 13 women and destroyed countless more. And now the tables were turned. Finally, On the 13th of November 2020, the virus overwhelmed him. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, dies aged 74. So, tell me what this is.
Peter's ashes.
How have you got them?
They were sent to Mick, his brother, and Mick divided them up between himself, one of Peter's friends, and me. He always said when I was going on holiday and things that he'd love to walk on the seafront and have fish and chips and do something normal. And he said, when I die, would you scatter my ashes to one of the places you go to on the seafront? So I said, yeah.
Decades later, having spent hundreds of hours talking to him on the phone and in person, it is clear to see that she had become loyal and attached to Sutcliffe enough to carry out his final wishes. For all of Sutcliffe's luck and delusions, the reality of his death was humiliation, soaking in his own piss. He wanted love and adoration, and from some, he got it. But by the time he died, the stories of his victims dominated the papers, and rightfully so, became a footnote in his own story. Within days of his death, he was already being forgotten. And I hope this is the last film that is ever made about him.